Hello guys, welcome back to my channel, Living with the Puzzle. It's me, Kayla, and sorry I'm looking like a crummy bum today, but honestly, this is sometimes what I look like when I don't leave my house. Because, why not? I don't gotta be anywhere. But I'm going to talk today about some more adulting struggles on the spectrum while I knit and enjoy. So basically, lately, finding a job for me has been kind of a pain. A lot of it's because college kids are, coming home for the summer, high school kids are working over the summer, so, therefore jobs are harder to find. But honestly, I've always, just felt like my autism, whether an employer knows it or not, is a huge factor. And it's probably just in my head, but I feel like a lot of employers can sniff it out, if you get what I'm saying. Like from a mile away, even without meeting me, like they just know possibly that I'm different from, neurotypical employees. And you know what? That's fine. I wish it didn't have to be that way, but it's whatever. It just makes jobs harder to find. I might have a little something I can do that's seasonal. I would like to get a actual part-time job that I can work year round while I'm in college. I do community college online, and that's been good. I've been doing it for a while now because I've been taking it slow. Just writing down my rows here, keeping track. And it's, adult life on the spectrum is not fucking easy. It's hard. But taking it one day at a time. Just doing my normal, still horse riding and stuff, and all that, knitting, crafting, crochet, all that. But I may be a proud autism advocate, but I'd be lying if I said, that I never had the desire, at least, once, or, for me, more than once in my life, to be a neurotypical girl. I've had that desire. I would be in high school even looking at these, perfect girls who honestly, aren't really perfect either. They're also human. But, I would see them with all their friends and their friend groups. They would just interact normally, and then there was me whose sense of humor didn't even make the slightest sense to any of of the neurotypical kids. My jokes didn't land usually, and I talk a lot, excessively, that, I overstimulate people by accident. And it's okay. I don't blame them for feeling that way because, as humans, we can only take so much of that. But it's something that, I feel sometimes. Why, what happened to, me that, or, me or my mother that, what did me or my mom do to deserve for me to, be born with the struggles and, the challenges of being an individual on the spectrum? Why? What even is the purpose of it. I know it's a genetic condition, but honestly, there are literal times in my life, and don't come for me. I mean, if you want to come for me for this, like, also fellow people with autism, it's okay. I'll happily listen to your opinion, but there's times where autism, like, a lot of the struggles that come with autism are a literal curse, because you have, like, intense anxiety and all this other shit that comes with it. Motor skills struggles, executive functioning, all that, and like having ADHD on top of it. Like, all these like occurring, disorders can happen. And that just makes it 10 times harder than it already has to be. So, like, yeah, sometimes I wish I wasn't autistic, and I'm sure that, or like didn't have autism. I personally like to use person first language for myself. But feel free to use whatever you're comfortable with. I personally like to use like person first language. But yeah, anyway, me and my ADHD going off on a tangent. I have, like, other people with autism also, like me, have probably, at least once in their life desired to be, normal, neurotypical, because it would make social encounters, social interaction, and like a lot of things at least 5 times easier for us. And, it would just be nice if for once we could go through a day that's painless. And like, do things that comes naturally to people who don't have the same struggles. And I've also struggled a lot. A lot of people on the spectrum have struggled with this, like, having anger issues. And I mean, anger and anxiety go kind of hand in hand sometimes, but I don't know. I feel like a lot of things, such as past, being bullied and other factors to contribute to anger issues. I've had anger issues. I mean, I've had them my whole life, but as I've gotten older, with, puberty, hormones, they get stronger. And with that, I've had to develop coping strategies. I take anxiety medication, and that sort of helps. I recently changed my diet to, eat healthier foods and take out, some carbohydrates, because a diet like high in carbohydrates can definitely affect your mental health negatively. Excuse me. But that's the thing, is with anger issues, is something, I really had to I have to reel in. Or else that could make finding employment harder, and it could be one of the reasons why. It could have been a contributing reason as to why, I was let go from a job. I mean, I may not have always realized that I had attitude on my face, because a lot of the time when I'm listening to someone's instructions, my face is blank because I'm trying to focus on what they're saying. And that goes for many neurodivergent individuals, and it can sometimes be seen as I don't know, arrogant or standoffish attitude, but that's not what it was for me. I was trying to take in what she was saying, and I would nod. I would go like, yeah. But I don't know. Could have been taken the wrong way, and this was a boss that really didn't have any prior autism experience or like working with individuals that have like high functioning autism. There were some individuals with disabilities from a day program that I used to work at. I can talk about that in another video of why I left that job at my own accord. I was not let go or fired, from that job. But I was let go from this one in February at the bakery because I just wasn't like the right fit, Sometimes I struggle with like the right amount of like ingredients for icing, I guess, or just, some of the cleaning around the shop. But, I tried my best, and that's all that matters. Sometimes I still can't help but be like, well, what if I had done this or that? But I have to like not think about it. But there were some individuals from a day program that I used to work at that volunteered or did like little, internships at the bakery, and I thought, this would be a good job for me because she allows, these individuals who are, from the same community as me, on the spectrum or, whatever, neurodivergent that work there, but she didn't really, she would say hello and like greet them and talk to them like a little bit, but the individuals were guided by like a job coach that would come with like a direct support staff from the center. So, and she didn't like have the time to like really interact as much with them, but I will say she did treat them like, the rest of her staff, because she would give us like all the employees Christmas cards with like really nice little gift cards in them and stuff like that. So she could have like a caring heart. She just didn't have the patience. And she would give the internship individuals from the day program like Christmas cards and stuff too. So she definitely cared, but like just didn't have the experience or the patience to like be able to handle it. And you know what? That's okay. It's not something I can blame her for. I could at least, sort of thank her for like giving it a run, like giving it a go. And like giving me a chance to at least try. And it didn't work out. It was when I first was let go from that job, my mental health like definitely went into a little bit of a spiral. My anger issues had definitely gotten worse. Especially after the one that I quit, like, had already taken a toll on my mental health because of the treatment I received there. But this one just, was like the last straw, and I kind of just was upset a lot and jealous, a little bit envious of my friends who have like jobs with very supportive managers and bosses and like even have employment at all. And, there I was, the jobless, like feeling like a jobless loser, even though I'm not a loser. Jobless, yes, but loser, no. Anyway, I've just been, searching for jobs, and I'm not going to stop. It's just something that I have to keep going with. And eventually, once I get a college degree, I want to be a paraeducator for the special ed kids in probably the high school I went to, or like the middle school I went to in my town. I can drive and, stuff like that. But I just think it might be a good career choice for me. Now, many people have asked me, why aren't you doing like art for your major or your career? Well, that's because as fun as like art and like crafts are, it's not really a realistic goal, because, or like a realistic full-time career. You could do it as a side hustle, which I sort of do. I like have an Etsy shop. Nobody's really bought from it yet, and that's okay. That sort of thing just kind of takes time. But being an artist full-time is not easy, because you never know if you're gonna have anybody like purchase from you every day. It's not like a guaranteed sustainable job, but it's a great side hustle, and I like to do it for fun. And I don't know if I'd want to turn my hobbies, like my passions and my hobbies, into like my actual job, because I feel like that would just take the fun out of it, like, I mean, I guess I could do like a career with horses, but that one also like doesn't have a lot of pay, and also like I don't know if I want to make my passions into like my job, because again, I don't want it to take the fun out of it. Like, I just want work, to be separate from that, and I can like my job. Like, I'm not gonna get a job that I feel like, oh, this is shit. I feel like shit here. No. My autism won't allow that. I'm gonna find something that, I can do that's not only realistic for me and like my needs as a person on the spectrum who, doesn't always do very well with like, I can't really do cash registers unless it's, card only, because I'm shit with money and like making change. I don't even know how I like pay my own shit, but thank God for digital banking. It's very neurodivergent friendly. I know y'all boomers and old people would be like, oh, well, back in my day, we didn't have that stuff. Well, now we do, and it's been very helpful for individuals like me who struggle with dyscalculia, and, which is basically dyslexia, but with math. But probably, I don't know if it's on a severe level. Well, maybe it is, because it's even like the most basic math can be like a pain in my ass. I mean, yeah, I know like 1 + 1 is 2, 2 + 2 is 4 and all that, but it's like you go higher and higher up. I have to like start counting on my fingers and stuff, or use a calculator. And, at my old job, one of the tasks I had sometimes at the end of the day was counting the till at the cash register, and I sucked at it. And my boss, like, I told her I struggle with math. I had something called dyscalculia. I mean, I'm not like, I don't know if I'm diagnosed with it or not, but like, I know when I was diagnosed with autism, I did get diagnosed with other like learning disabilities and ADHD, but I told her I like had dyscalculia. It's like math dyslexia, and she was like, what is that? And I was like, oh, it's basically like dyslexia, but with math. And she was like, oh, okay, you'll use your calculator and stuff. So I did that, and I was kind of, I was really slow and meticulous with like the money, but I still probably was getting shit wrong because, I suck at math. And yeah. And I remember like she pulled me into her office and had a talk with me, about a lot of things and like asking why there would be like, not the right amount of money at the end of the day. And I'd be like, well, I'm not stealing if that's what you think. And she was like, don't even go there. I wasn't even thinking that. But then, it was all this stuff that she was telling me about that was so like frustrating. And I just had an absolute fucking like mental breakdown. Excuse my language for people that don't like swearing, but you're probably going to hear a lot of it on here because I just ramble. And this is a channel for rambling. And, relatable stuff. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how the dynamic is in the workforce for neurotypicals versus neurodivergent. I mean, my mom has ADHD and she's, struggled too. I don't know if it is in the same way as I have, but, similar because, I mean, we both have ADHD, but ADHD is also a spectrum. It's very similar to autism in some ways, just without some of the motor skills deficits that people with autism usually have. But it's definitely interesting to see how, like, neurotypicals are treated and, like, versus, us, like, people with autism. I'm not saying it's people with neurotypicals' fault at all. They're born, regular, and that's cool, that's great that, they function, they are happy living their life. I'm trying my best here to just be happy and live my neurodivergent life. As long as it'll go for. It might be hard a lot of the time, but I'm trying to stay positive and have a good outlook. But anyway, yeah, just that's like one of the hardest things to do as an adult on the spectrum is finding work. Yeah, like that's probably the main thing that's like the hardest. But my first ever job was at a florist here in my town that I grew up in, like, ever since I was like 8. Well, like, we moved here when I was like 7. But in this town, in my like town and state, like, I worked at this flower shop, and they were these, like, older women. They were so nice to me. They were like the perfect first job, but sadly, like, the store went out of business a few years ago, and I had been there for like a year and a half already, and was like, looking forward to working there even longer if, I didn't get the job at like the day program, which turned out to be a fail. But I will say the best job I've had so far, like best part-time job I've had so far, with like the nicest people, was probably the florist that I worked at. I even still talk to some of my old co-workers. A lot of them were very lovely ladies, and didn't even care that I had anything different about me. They just were like, work hard. That's all that matters. Try your best. We'll help you. And, that's how it was. That's what it was. I did my best there. Awkward silence. I know. Trying to form another thought. What more I can say about being an adult on the spectrum. That's also hard. Well, I guess you could also say that, like, just overall, some adults on the spectrum may beg to differ, but honestly, my teenage years were probably some of my easier times as an individual on the spectrum. Like my high school years, not middle school. Hell no. Middle school, I was kind of a mess socially. Still am, but I have friends. It was hard for me to make friends back then. But I think being like a teen on the spectrum was easier than being an adult on the spectrum. I don't know, just much simpler times. And, even neurotypicals would probably agree that, childhood and teen years were a much simpler time. But I will say my childhood was a good one. I had a lot of, like, my hardships, but I always had my mom there for me and stuff, but it still was probably harder than my teenage years. Like, especially school-wise. I, struggled academically. I just needed the correct support to be able to succeed. Which, that goes for me now as an adult, too, because, children with autism grow up to be adults with autism. It doesn't go away, as much as people like to think it does. It just, we progress. And that's what matters, is we progress every day, every month, every year. Things get better as they go on, and there's always, like, a light at the end of the tunnel. And I already, am seeing mine. I can see my light at the end of the tunnel for my future. I think that, I'm gonna thrive one day on my own. It might be hard, but I think I can do it, especially with, like, the right support system around me. Like, of friends and stuff. I have a lot of neurodivergent friends. I have some neurotypical allies and peers. I have some neurotypical friends. But, they'd all be a great support system. Anyway, I think I will wrap up this ramble. It was very nice talking to you all. And, I hope you have a good morning, night, evening, wherever you are watching this in the world. And see ya.